Have you read this? You gotta hear what Pope Leo said. Hear it in this episode of The Catholic Money Show. Oh boy. Let's just cut straight to the chase. Let me read you
Sorry,
the first paragraph
your hair.
of this encyclical from Pope Leo. All right, here it is. That the spirit of revolutionary change, which has long been disturbing the nations of the world, should have passed beyond the sphere of politics and made its influence felt in the cognate sphere of practical economics is not surprising. The elements of the conflict now raging are unmistakable. In the vast expansion of industrial pursuits and the marvelous discoveries of science, in the changed relations between masters and workmen, in the enormous fortunes of some few individuals, and the utter poverty of the masses, the increased self-reliance and closer mutual combination of the working classes, as also, finally, in the prevailing moral degeneracy. The momentous gravity of the state of things now obtaining fills every mind with painful apprehension. Wise men are discussing it. Practical men are proposing schemes. Popular meetings, legislators, and rulers of nations are all busy with it. Actually, there is no question which has taken deeper hold on the public mind.
Wait, who said this?
Pope Leo.
Pope Leo?
Yeah.
Our Pope Leo?
Yes, Pope Leo, Pope of the Catholic Church, Pope Leo.
Pope Leo.
Yes.
The 14th?
No.
What?
Pope Leo. The 13th.
Oh!
In
Pope Leo the
1891, over 130 years ago. I mean, you hear this, it sounds like he's talking about right now, doesn't it?
You might change a couple of things in there for our current circumstances, but I'd say much of what he began the conversation of there just extended through the last century. Yeah. And we're just picking it up with new clothes on. Picking up the same old conversation.
Less well-made, won't last as long clothes.
Everything that was there was kind of on steroids now. And there's even more moral conundrums. You might enter into this, he missed the human sexuality and the distortions that are going on there. But anyway, this is what we're going to talk about in an upcoming series of our podcast, The Catholic Money Show. And why are we doing that?
Well, because we've got a Pope Leo right now.
We do have a Pope Leo. And when he walked out onto the balcony in April, May, my brain...
Popuary. I don't know what month it was.
When he walked out and announced his name, I think everybody was just a little bit struck. There's really been no shortage of commentary on it. And I think everybody has just absolutely loved the choice of the name. And it's been so symbolic. And many people are asking, okay, Pope Leo XIII, who was he? And have been unpacking his legacy, because in many ways, Pope Leo XIV is communicating to us as a church, and he's really actually communicating to the world that he plans to pick up what Pope Leo XIII put down. Ooh. He plans to continue that legacy, and not only on some of the topics that were introduced in Rerum Novarum, which we are now going to get into, which has also spilled over into a couple of different encyclicals since then. But Pope Leo XIV, and why I love him so much, is, I want to say at least a half a dozen times in some of his public homilies or comments he's had since being elected, he has mentioned AI, the AI revolution that is upon us.
Yes.
And he knows, and he has the wisdom and the foresight to see that this is probably even bigger than the Industrial Revolution, and it's even potentially more disastrous. Again, the issues that we're facing now, they're getting really intense, really scary. And so I think it makes sense, it behooves us to go back, to unpack Rerum Novarum, and to understand what this document actually said. Because if we don't understand Rerum Novarum, we're going to start missing some of the things that Pope Leo XIV is trying to teach us about and lead the world in.
Yes.
And if we as Catholics weren't leading in the Industrial Revolution and saw all of this wreckage that Pope Leo XIII had to step in and begin making commentary on, to begin changing, I think Pope Leo XIV, he's inviting us to get involved at the forefront, at the tip of the spear, and he plans, you can see it in his leadership, he plans to be a voice that is constantly leading in the AI revolution. And I think as Catholics, we have a responsibility to do it because the moral implications of us not being involved are just too high. Think of it. If the AI revolution does whatever other people want it to do, or even the enemy wants it to do, I don't know, 10, 20 years from now, we will have humans growing in artificial wombs, full-blown Matrix style. We'll have glasses that are constantly recording things, and then it'll be a Wall-E situation.
20 months from now.
And like whoever has the most money can just create evidence to implicate whoever they don't like in crimes and have them jailed or killed. It could be that disastrous. And there's a million other horrific scenarios if the AI revolution goes off kilter and does not go the route of virtue and it goes the route of vice. The implications are disastrous and horrible and completely unethical and immoral. So anyway, off the high horse on why I think it is so important. We have to understand Pope Leo XIII in order to actually interpret what Pope Leo XIV is beginning to invite us into.
Yes, so over and I think the next 4 episodes in this series, we are going to be looking at, bit by bit, the encyclical Rerum Novarum from Pope Leo XIII. And this is such an important document. This is, in many ways, kind of the kickoff of Catholic social teaching.
Wasn't it the first encyclical that stepped out of just being pure theology?
I think so. I'm not familiar with every encyclical ever, so
I think it might have been the first social encyclical.
Yeah. So this is a big deal. And I'd say, these days, I mean, yeah, it makes sense that the church would speak on some of these things, advocate for the common good and for the underserved and all that. And so even as we'll see here at the beginning of it, he kind of is making the case for why this is being written and why the church is talking about this. So it's just very interesting to see living now in some of the fruits of this understanding of a newer responsibility of the church, to speak in this very official way.
So let's go back.
And
let's go back.
Yeah, because this was all written in response to the Industrial Revolution, moving from this very agrarian, farm-based society to factories, to urbanization, to millions of people living in a city, totally changing. And I don't think we can fully appreciate it because we are just so used to how this is, the fruits of this, how it fundamentally changed everything. It changed so much, and there was so much at stake that it could have destroyed that, and some things it didn't destroy, but that Pope Leo, speaks out for and advocates for. So this is, man, I love this encyclical.
In a lot of ways too, why are we talking about this on the Catholic Money Show? Well, Rerum Novarum talks directly about economics, wealth, payment, money. And a lot of the encyclicals that sprung off the back of it, they also unpack that too. And I would say most Catholics aren't completely familiar with some of these concepts that are in this document or the ones that have come after it. And in many ways, our formation around economics and money have been influenced by American Protestantism, not Catholic social teaching. And so I kind of hope in this series of episodes to lay a really solid foundation for that.
This, and we'll get to it here very shortly. This document is so important that future, now past, but popes, later popes, when they wrote encyclicals about this encyclical. And right, there's their quad, I don't have it in front of me, quadricino honor, like 40 years. Because it's called, because it was 40 years later, that one was written. And then JP2 wrote one, Centesimus Annus, 100 years after Rerum Novarum. It's that big. Look at this.
That big of a deal.
Goosebumps. We got, come on, focus this up. I got goosebumps.
If you're on YouTube, you can see it.
Look at those goosebumps. It's, I'm so excited. So,
prediction. What is Pope Leo XIV's first encyclical going to be?
Rerum Novarum 2, the Pope Strikes Back.
I hope he names it that. As an American, he must.
It's going to be a trilogy, guys. Don't worry. Get your special popcorn bucket. No. So what we're going to be doing in this series, we're going paragraph by paragraph. So in this first one, we're setting the scene a little bit. We're talking about the importance of this thing. And then we are going to dive into the first 15 paragraphs. And if you're familiar with almost any sort of a document in paragraph, they're not actual paragraphs. Sometimes a paragraph can be 2 paragraphs or more. So we're just going by the numbers that it's using, 1 through 15 in this one. So if you want to, read along at home or whatever, that'll be that. And at the end of this episode, we'll give you the range to read to get ready for the next one. But
yeah, and you can get this in a printed version, but you can also get it you can print it off for free.
Yeah, you can get it online. You can go to the Vatican website. You can get it, all that. But let's just still hear more about what's going on in the world as part of this Industrial Revolution.
Before we give the context, can I just say, whenever I read Rerum Novarum, the visual that comes to my mind is Les Mis. And I don't know the timing there, but is it around-ish the same time?
This is really going to show my ignorance of French history.
Anyway,
I don't know.
It seems like it was kind of, Les Mis feels like a situation, the whole thing is just, there's victories and tragedies, but it seems very much in this time. And a lot of abuses that were happening. You can see it in the movie.
Sure.
And the book. Really long book. Remember that time I read it?
Yeah. That decade, yes.
So go ahead, paint the picture.
All right.
Paint Les Mis.
The Industrial Revolution is in full swing. Cities are growing, and we haven't really done this hardly before. It was, I think, we just heard something crazy about this, but it was like 1,000 years or something between a city being this big in the past. We just hadn't done this, so we didn't know what
like
to do.
The Dark Ages.
Yeah.
And then,
so there's slums, there's filth, there's people just crammed into very little space, and we talk about the wealth gap and all this, but I mean, the 1% was still that's when I think maybe they became the 1%, controlling over half the wealth. Most workers just living hand to mouth, right? Some in today's term, paycheck to paycheck, right? Yeah. We talk about, we want flex work, we want, what if we had a 30-hour work week, all this stuff. Back then,
we're a little
people were working 12 to 16 hours a day. Maybe they got Sunday off.
Yeah.
That's a lot out. It's like, that's up to 160 hours a week. And it wasn't just adults doing this. Child labor was huge. I actually went on a little bit of a rabbit hole on this one, looking into this, doing the research, but it was kids, maybe 8, maybe 9, as young as 5. And they're working in these factories, in these machines. They were smaller. They could get into stuff. They're getting parts of their bodies chopped off. It was seen as this like, man, these kids aren't producing anything. They're not contributing. Let's get them to work. And it was this huge, that was society's thought about children. They're these freeloaders, let alone, oh my goodness, orphans, even on top of it all. Let's get them in the factory. So you see this, you see it if you watched, what was it? Duke and Miss Scarlet and Duke.
Miss Scarlet and the Duke?
Yeah.
That was around that time?
There's some flashback, to him working in that factory.
Oh,
right?
maybe, yeah. Sure.
or that other guy was working in the factory. And so, yeah, it was so common. And yeah, these kids just getting just literally ripped apart.
Wasn't there a book
Lots of injuries.
everybody read in high school about some horrible factory?
Oh, that's the Jungle by Upton Sinclair. Yeah,
There you
meat
go.
packing industry, and yeah,
Yes.
people just getting ground up and stuff.
And rats being thrown in,
Yeah,
and
just put it in the burgers. Nobody will know. I mean, which is it, that or pink slime? Like, which
I
one
don't
do you
know.
want? I don't want people, obviously. But yes, there was
But it was the labor conditions were absolutely abysmal.
abysmal. Yes, and so because of this, you got a lot of other things going on now. People think, man, this is terrible. This is where socialism starts bubbling up.
Sure.
You know, the Communist Manifesto was written about 40 years before Rerum Novarum, and it's putting forth all these ideas that just are not going to work, bringing forth a lot of violence and schemes of governance that just don't work. I mean, if we look at any of the countries even now trying to do socialism, it's just not working very well, especially the most restrictive ones, North Korea and China, especially before opening up their economy a bit to the West.
Yeah, the promises seem big on the front of it, but then in lived reality, it's cheap. And it doesn't actually yield the fruit that it promises. It's just smoke and mirrors, and it continues to further abuses to the poor.
Yeah, and then because there's so much mistrust of the poor, they must be doing something wrong. I mean, this is Scrooge at the beginning of A Christmas Carol, right? Are there no poor houses? Are there no jails? You know, and they're like, oh no, those are very full. And some would rather die than live there. Well, they better do it then.
Basically,
decrease the surplus population.
So if you were poor, it was assumed that it was your fault, that you were morally degenerate, that you were making poor decisions, and that you were just an immoral person.
You weren't in a bad spot. You were a bad person.
Sure.
Yes.
Which I'd say still can carry on today.
Absolutely.
Even.
You're from the wrong side of the tracks, or the wrong neighborhood.
Or if you're poor, you are viewed at least in sometimes in America, as a lazy person who misprioritizes your resources. When it's not always that, it can be that, but that could also apply to somebody who does have large amounts of money as well, though. So anyway, but that was there. That was kind of the backdrop. This horrible working condition. You see Marxism rising to the stage saying, we're going to be this ideology is going to be the saving grace. This is going to be what fixes it. If only we could implement this. So it's getting everybody amped up. It's getting even the poor people ticked off at those who have the wealth. It's creating a lot of division, which we've only now seen further escalation of this, of people pointing fingers and getting angry. That mistrust of the poor, that hatred of the wealthy, that was the breeding ground of Pope Leo XIII sitting down and writing Rerum Novarum.
Yes.
And he knew that the church needed to say something here.
Yes, because the world was now splitting into a false dichotomy of you can either have socialism, denying the right to private property, encouraging class warfare and division, or you can have unbridled, unregulated capitalism that dehumanizes workers and treats them as tools instead of people. Those are two really bad options. And it can seem like even today, I think, it can be presented as, well, those are your options. You can talk so much about how the other one is so bad, so that means the other one must be good, right? No, they're both terrible options.
If you
there
take
is
them
a third
to their
way.
extremes,
So that is what's being presented here in Rerum Novarum and then expanded upon in later church teaching. So let's get into this.
Let's do it.
So we're talking now, we're getting into the text, and this first section, paragraphs 1 to 6, it's the church's authority to speak on these questions. Why are we talking about economics and money and all of that?
Right. Shouldn't the church just stick to theology? Shouldn't we just be talking about the divinity of Christ or the sacraments? Why are you even daring to speak into how a business should be run, how a government might want to set up its economic policies. Why do you even have a microphone? Who gave this guy a microphone? What does Pope Leo say about that?
Yeah, so but he comes to it because there's this concern for the common good. And right, we're looking at relationships, right? We one of my favorites, we look here in Luke 3, where John the Baptist, he's talking to people about changing your life to get ready for the Messiah. And he talks to them about money, about their wages, about helping others. So even all, 1900 or whatever it was, 1800 years before this was written, that was the deal. Like our money and how we use our possessions, how we relate to others, it's all interlinked and it's all vitally important for our souls. So he's just picking that up. He's continuing that and talking about, hey, yeah, there's a moral way to do this and thus an immoral way. And we talk about morals here. So I'm going to talk to you about this.
Right. So the church has this moral responsibility to talk about this, and that because human dignity is being impacted by this, we have to talk about it. We have to have a say.
Yes.
So I'm not sure where you're at.
That's all right. In paragraph 6, it says that a small number of very rich men have been able to lay upon the teeming masses of the laboring poor a yoke little better than slavery itself. So, right, I think it seems natural, it seems expected that a pope would write something condemning slavery. And so if this economic situation is practically as bad, which it was, why wouldn't he talk about it? Why not speak about this?
He would.
And I think what was interesting here in Socialism 2, he just said that he talks about that there are principles of truth and justice to dictate this, and that there are relative rights and mutual duties of the rich and of the poor, of capital and labor. And I think that is like, we all have a role to play. It's not just scolding the rich guys, but understanding everybody's got a role in making sure that our society is functioning, that things are peaceful, and that we are seeing each other as fellow humans. Today, we are going to cover paragraphs 1 to 15. We're going to do it in kind of a couple chunks roughly by the theme, the ideas presented in those paragraphs. So the first one, about 1 through 6, which is one of the things it's talking about is the church's authority to speak on this. Like we said earlier, this is one of, if not the first encyclical touching on things one might think is outside of the sphere of the Pope to speak on.
Right. It's important. And because this touches human dignity and because it is impacting the common good, the church has a right to speak on these things. So don't try to put baby in a corner here and say we can only speak on the divinity of Christ or the sacraments. The church deserves to have a voice, and she was going to go ahead and make that voice heard.
Yes, that's good.
So let's get into some of the paragraphs.
Yes. He's talking about the condition of the working classes. And he says, this discussion is not easy, nor is it void of danger. It's no easy matter to define the relative rights and mutual duties of the rich and of the poor, of capital and of labor. And the danger lies in this, that crafty agitators are intent on making use of these differences of opinion to pervert men's judgments and to stir up the people to revolt, to sow discord and distrust between people.
I mean, I think we've now only seen a furthering of that. Social media just took this. If this was a dumpster fire, this threw gasoline on it. Social
Shoved
media
it off the Grand Canyon.
and then ran a train into it.
So bad, yes.
But it isn't easy and it's not void of danger, but he's saying we're still going to go into it. We're still going to step up to the plate here and have a voice and have some commentary.
Yeah. And he makes a nice little summary, maybe a paraphrase almost of what's been going on, what the fruit of the Industrial Revolution has been, when he says, public institutions and the laws set aside, the ancient religion. Hence,
Mm.
by degrees, it has come to pass that working men have been surrendered, isolated and helpless, to the hard-heartedness of employers and the greed of unchecked competition.
It continues. Mischief has been increased by rapacious usury, which, although more than once condemned by the church, is nevertheless under a different guise, but with like injustice still practiced by covetous and grasping men.
Ooh. What's very interesting, covetous, oh no, I guess he doesn't. I was going to say something about Scrooge. They do
love
call him a
Scrooge.
covetous old sinner, but I thought it was covetous and grasping. I thought, how incredible is that? But no, covetous old sinner, yeah. I mean, in some ways.
Sometimes I wish he was around now to comment.
Who, Scrooge?
No. Hope Leo the 13th. Like, you thought usury was bad then.
Have you heard of credit cards?
Have you been to a payday lender?
Yeah.
But no, those existed then too, and they were absolutely horrific. At least now there's some level of legislation.
Harvest time for the moneylenders. I mean, in some ways, I just want to make every page bright yellow.
It's so good. I underlined way too much.
He keeps going, right? He says, to this must be added that the hiring of labor and the conduct of trade are concentrated in the hands of comparatively few, so that a small number of very rich men have been able to lay upon the teeming masses of the laboring poor a yoke little better than that of slavery itself.
That's a bold word. So essentially, nobody owns a person anymore, but for all practical implications, it's almost as egregious as that is.
Yeah.
Because they aren't going to be able to buy bread if they don't work this shift.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to be able to pay the rent if they don't show up and do this factory work.
Yeah, and the conditions they're living in are just so bad and so, in many ways, inhumane. It's just like, what have we done? What kind of a system have we created here? Right?
These persons are just cogs in a wheel
Yeah.
to make profit for someone else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's throwing open the curtains and letting this light shine on what we've done and what just letting capitalism go wild has done, what we've allowed concupiscence in the hearts of men to do to one another.
Mm-hmm.
And then
I was just going to say, I think we should pause a minute here and acknowledge that there are still places in the world where this still is very much a reality.
Absolutely.
In China, where people have to pay the factories to work.
Live in the factory
They live in the factory dorms, and essentially it wipes out almost all the money they earn anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And they work still these insane shifts.
Yeah.
To create cheap goods. In North Korea, they don't even get paid sometimes. Mm-hmm. They're just expected to work and work and work and work and it be taken by the party.
Yeah.
This still exists.
Thai fishing, and especially with shrimp. That's a whole crazy thing to look into, let alone even like this scammers, right? A lot of the times you get a scam text message, that person's been trafficked into some really bad situation where they will maybe lose their life if they don't bring in enough for this person this place they can't escape. Like, it's craziness. Yeah. All the things that are still happening that have flowed out of this situation he's describing here. So he's saying, hey, okay, things aren't that great. And now he starts going into like, okay, well, one remedy suggested by the world is socialism. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that a little bit. And so he starts to, and he brings it up here and then at other times too, but then he starts coming into like the main like hit against socialism, right? Socialism, we want to get rid of private property. Nobody else has anything. The state owns it all. And
the virtuous state can make sure everybody gets the same amount.
Yes. And then he starts teaching and showing the fundamental right of private property, why it is so, and all that. So they're kind of flowing right into that in this. And as you see this, you go, oh yes, this of course is why the church would speak on this, because it's these fundamental matters of dignity. I thought,
Yeah, and it's paragraph 4.
yes,
is
that's
where
when
you're
he starts
getting
making
into
that
this.
transition.
Yeah, and he says, I think very eloquently, that to remedy these wrongs, the socialists, working on the poor man's envy of the rich, are striving to do away with private property. In many ways, again, they're exploiting the poor man and his suffering by giving him an enemy.
Yes.
And then by making it seem like because other people have something, that's why you don't have something. And that's not true. It's a false dichotomy.
Mhm.
There's other ways to make sure that everyone can have private property and have that be protected.
Yes.
And the state having it is not the solution.
Mhm. Yeah, he says these aspects, these contentions of socialism are emphatically unjust. They would rob the lawful possessor, distort the functions of the state, and create an utter confusion in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of wreck everything. So then he starts talking about the rights of private property as he's getting into these paragraphs of 6. And here we go. Now it's turning the page.
You got into 6?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm moving into 6.
I underlined basically
all of 5.
I underlined all of 5.
5 is a
And
goodie.
I think he gets more into it later. But
Go for it,
he
girl.
just introduces, he says that it is surely undeniable that when a man engages in remunerative, it's hard for me to say that word, labor, the impelling reason and motive of his work is to obtain property and thereafter to hold it as his own, very own. If one man hires out another, his strength to another, his strength or skill, he does so for the purpose of receiving in return what is necessary for the satisfaction of his needs. He therefore expressly intends to acquire a full right and real not only to the remuneration, but also to the disposal of such remuneration, just as he pleases. Thus, if he lives sparingly, saves money, and for greater security invests his savings in land, the land in such case is just his wages under another form, and consequently a working man's little estate thus purchased should be as completely as his disposal as are the wages he receives for his labor. So everything that we purchase is actually just an extension of the value we provided in the market.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just our wages disguised in these other things.
Yes.
And so that's part of the reason why it ought to be protected.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there's a right to work, to be paid, and to use those wages as we see fit. And those things that we acquire are just our wages under a different form, right? My wage transformed into a pencil. So that's my pencil. That was that brick I laid the other day, or whatever it is. Yes. And so, and then 6 kind of doubles down on this. It says, for every man has by nature the right to possess property as his own. And then later on, he says, it must be within his right to possess things not merely for temporary and momentary use, as other living things do. Because in this one, he's talking about
the difference between us and animals.
Yes, this idea of property is a uniquely human thing. So not as other things do, but to have and to hold them in stable and permanent possession. He must not only have things that perish in the use, but those also which, though they have been reduced into use, continue for further use in time. So
you bought a hammer, you can keep using it.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So
sorry if you were going to give
an
example.
That's perfect. That works for me.
Somebody shouldn't be able to take it back or take it and give it away.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you choose to.
Yes. We're dealing in these fundamental rights of humanity. This is the church's realm to speak on. And now, while we're here, let's talk about work. Let's talk about what this is about. And really first set the stage by saying, what are we talking about here? What is work? What is capital? How do these work together? And that's what we're going into here in kind of 7-ish to 13.
Okay. Let's get into it.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, it's later on he's going to dive deeper into more remuneration. That's not the first time we're going to hear that word. Mm-hmm. We're also going to hear more about the universal destination of goods. We're getting there. So anybody who's playing along at home and knows some of these terms, just know that we're still in the setup phase. Mm-hmm. He's kind of defining terms and defining the problem before he dives into actual solutions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's dive into 7. Hence, man should not only possess the fruits of the earth, but also the very soil, inasmuch as from the produce of the earth he has to lay by provision for the future.
Mm-hmm.
Man's needs do not die out, but forever recur. Although satisfied today, they demand fresh supplies for tomorrow. And then it says, there is no need to bring in the state. Man precedes the state and possesses, prior to the formation of any state, the right of providing for the substance of his body.
Man precedes the state. That's cool, man. You just think about that.
Man created the state.
Yeah?
So, of course, he precedes the state.
God made man. Man made the state.
That's a reference to the 10
Oh,
Commandments.
yeah, man. Not the state, but anyway. Talking about inalienable rights. These are fundamental, what it means to be human rights here. And he goes on, this is where he's starting to sow these seeds of universal destination of goods and this balance between that and private property. In 8, he says, the fact that God has given the earth for the use and enjoyment of the whole human race can in no way be a bar to the owning of private property. For God has granted the earth to mankind in general, not in the sense that all without distinction can deal with it as they like, but rather that no part of it was assigned to anyone in particular, and that the limits of private possession have been left to be fixed by man's own industry and by the laws of individual races. And he, of course, goes on. And then he begins then here, and I think later on too, just how private property is a way to ensure that all have access to the goods of the earth.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that when we provide work, work is dignified, and it's partly a way we work out our salvation. Mm-hmm. There was work in the garden, and only after the fall it became toilsome. And this is obviously a setting where it was on steroids toilsome to many people. But our work is not just a commodity. We're not meant to just be machines or tools of production. We were made in the image and likeness of God, and when we work, we are to receive payment for that and then to turn that into private property, and no one should be able to take that or steal that or redistribute it.
Yes.
And that is against our own dignity as workers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is interesting, and maybe this will come up again in our discussion in the series, but this is in some ways, this idea of people just being looked at as a cog in the machine, a part that could be interchanged, and how, right, moving from an agrarian, from an artisanal kind of society and setup into an industrial one can dehumanize and bring about seeing people this way. I think there's a risk too now in this AI revolution of a similar thing happening.
Oh,
because now I don't need this. I mean, especially in the future, once everything gets even better at this, I don't need the guy who can code an app. I just need somebody who can sit at the computer and kind of type the right stuff into it.
You might not
to get
need
it to happen now.
Someone to create graphics.
Yeah.
You might not need somebody to edit a video.
So now people are now becoming just more and more interchangeable, becoming more and more just like a piece of this machine, not an individual created in the likeness and image of God, unique among all creation.
And I think I know we're going to talk more about this in our final episode, the practical applications today, but Pope Leo XIII, in this encyclical, he talks about that balance of the perspective of both the workers, knowing what their rights are and their responsibilities are, but also those business owners or those who are legislating or who those are working in the state, and that they have a right and responsibility as well. And I want to say that right now, Catholic business owners that maybe are watching this, we're experiencing the AI revolution right now. And I think that we have a responsibility to identify the spots in our businesses where AI is going to make our employees unnecessary, but it's up to us to find other ways they could contribute so they can still earn a wage in a way that AI cannot replace them.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? We need to find new work for them because they still need to earn a living, and they ought to. And we have a responsibility towards them to not just discard them because we found something cheaper and faster. And if that attitude had been part of the Industrial Revolution, which undoubtedly some incredible business owners saw that and figured things out like that was their responsibility. We need to lead with that.
Yes.
That needs to be at the forefront because this created such terrible conditions because so many people became economically vulnerable because entire industries were wiped out and there was just no money. So we have to be cautious of that right now in our time.
Yeah.
Because that could happen again. Whole trades could be wiped out within 3 years.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of people who would have no income.
I mean, and think about it too. All right, maybe you don't have or need, a person now to do whatever role, and you're, now okay, you don't need a person in that role. You're still making the same amount of money, maybe more now. All right, well, this is an opportunity now to expand the number of things or the types of things that you or your business does that do require a human, an extra person.
Right.
That person you couldn't hire before, well, now you can. So there we new opportunities if we are looking for them and not just a way to cut the bottom line.
Right. And I think that that's a responsibility of the employers.
So what's interesting is that as he's talking about the state, the rights of providing for oneself, and then he transitions into speaking about the family. And
I love that.
I've heard this at least a lot in all these different places, and people are talking about the importance of family and all this.
The family.
And I don't know if this is where it was initially put forward or not, but I was like, oh, here we go. I've heard of this. And so he's talking about
Paragraph 12.
Yes, paragraph 12 here at the end. He goes, hence we have the family, the society of a man's house. A society very small, one must admit, but nonetheless a true society, and one older than any state. Consequently, it has rights and duties peculiar to itself, which are quite independent of the state. Is that fundamental building block of society. The family. And then 13, again, that was one of those, I just wanted to highlight the whole thing. I was like, that's going to be too much. So I just drew a big line down the side of it. But I thought what was interesting here, kind of the second half of it, is a family, no less than a state, is, as we have said, a true society, governed by an authority peculiar to itself, that is to say, by the authority of the father. Provided, therefore, the limits which are prescribed by the very purposes for which it exists be not transgressed, the family has at least equal rights with the state in the choice and pursuit of the things needful to its preservation and its just liberty. We say at least equal rights, for inasmuch as the domestic household is antecedent, as well in idea as in fact, to the gathering of men into a community, the family must necessarily have rights and duties which are prior to those of the community and founded more immediately in nature. If the families on entering into association and fellowship were to experience hindrance in a commonwealth instead of help, and were to find their rights attacked instead of being upheld, society would rightly be an object of detestation rather than of desire. Right? Nobody's going to want to come together and form a community if it's making everything worse. And that the family has these just as much, at least just as much importance and rights as a state, as a society.
Right. And he continues this in paragraph 14, which I think we're going to start shifting into next. But he even says that, true, if a family finds itself in exceeding distress, utterly deprived of the counsel of friends, and without any prospect of extricating itself, it is right that extreme necessity be met by public aid, since each family is part of the commonwealth. In like manner, If within the precincts of the household there occur grave disturbance of mutual rights, public authority should intervene to force each party to yield to the other its proper due. For this is not to deprive citizens of their rights, but justly and properly to safeguard and strengthen them. So again, he's not saying, leave us alone. The state should have no say and there should be nothing. Leave the family alone. We're always holding things in tension with each other.
Yes.
Because in this, he's saying, you know what? There might be times when a family is in such utter crisis that they need help from the state. And we know that. We know that. Especially as Americans, we have programs that help people when they're in a crisis. And a lot of people like to give a lot of hate because there rightly is abuse of these. Let's just acknowledge that. There's also many people who aren't abusing them and that it really is tremendously beneficial for, and they only temporarily utilize them when they're in a distress. And that is right that the state helps them in that situation. Or there could be a situation where parents are not providing for their kids. They're neglecting them. Should the state do something? Yes, absolutely. It should potentially rehome the children so they can be provided for. Or if there is a father withholding wages and not providing for his family, parents are separated, the state might even need to garnish the wages to give it to the family so they can eat. Sometimes the state does have a responsibility to help, but it doesn't mean that it just has the overarching ability to just take everything. So the responsibility between the family and the state are always kind of in tension with each other, but they have rights and responsibilities within each kind of complementary to each other.
Yes, the state should uphold and strengthen the family in its actions. And so, right, we talk about that, but right, remember, we talked about kind of, okay, things are crazy, things aren't going well. One provided answer to this is socialism. This is why it's not going to be very good, because it ignores private property, which is a fundamental human right, and the right to work and have our wages and use them as we wish. And that is going into this idea of society. And what is that for? And it is built upon the family. And now he's starting to bring it back around to talk about how with socialism, right, the state ends up, sorry, it's on the previous page. It says paternal authority can neither be abolished nor absorbed by the state. And then at the end of that, that's 14. He says, the socialists, therefore, in setting aside the parent and setting up a state supervision, act against natural justice and destroy the structure of the home. So he's bringing this all back. Again, this is another reason why this can't work. This is not going to be the solution that you think it might be, because it is fundamentally against everything that is the building block of human society. And then he goes on to, in 15, to again, kind of
underline the whole thing.
Right. Keep piling on socialism here. He says the door would be thrown open to envy, to mutual invective, into discord. The sources of wealth themselves would run dry, for no one would have any interest in exerting his talents or his industry. And that ideal equality about which they entertain pleasant dreams would be in reality the leveling down of all to a like condition of misery and degradation. Hence, it is clear that the main tenet of socialism, community of goods, must be utterly rejected, since it only injures those whom it would seem meant to benefit, is directly contrary to the natural rights of mankind, and would introduce confusion and disorder into the commonweal.
I mean, he wrote this in 1891. When did North Korea start becoming North Korea?
When did they have mics to start dropping? That's when.
No, but when did they've only had 3 regimes that are like part of that current North Korean whatever. I wonder when it began, but like, what a prophet! What a prophet! Because he's just describing what we all see played out over there, and just how horrible it is.
Yeah, this was in 1948.
Is when they started.
Way ahead.
Yeah, so North Korea obviously didn't read Rerum Novarum.
They can do with reading a few more encyclicals, I think.
No, but really, I think if somehow North Korean citizens found this document, it would probably resonate so deeply on a soul level because this is what they're experiencing and living through.
Mm.
They're promised that they're going to be safe and secure, and it's just nothing. That's not the reality. Very few at the top have all of the money,
Yeah.
and everybody else just lives like a prisoner
Yeah.
and is brainwashed.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see how when you implement socialism, it just takes away so much freedom, not just to own private property, but look how extreme it's played out there. It's literally stolen them. It's stolen everything from them, even the ability to think or to learn or to read books, or every human freedom has been stripped. So it was proposed as some utopian to help lift everyone. Rising tides raises all ships, right? A lot of people will say that. But he's saying, Pope Leo XIII is saying, no. It's going to be a leveling down of everyone except maybe these few that control it.
Yeah.
And that's just going to be the reality.
I'll tell you, I'm no encyclical aficionado or critic or anything. But boy, oh boy, this one sure is a page turner.
It is.
It's like,
yeah. There have been some goodies out there.
It's just like bomb after bomb, just blows you up. Mic drops all over the place. Like, man, it's so good.
And I also just love how balanced it is.
Oh yeah.
And I love the church's teachings.
Yeah,
are always balanced.
He's hitting on on capitalism, on socialism. Like, it's not a partisan thing. It's a human thing, and that's what we're doing.
Yep. Yeah. So anyway, are we calling it a day on the first?
I think so.
On wrapping up the first little bit here.
So please, I implore you, go out there, grab yourself a copy of this. Just do a search, Rerum Novarum. You'll get the Vatican website. That's a great place to get it from. Though I will let you know, if you go print it out, they did a weird thing with the line breaks on the website. So when you hit print, the PDF it generates doesn't put a space after getting rid of the line breaks. So a lot of words end up mushed next to each other. It's kind of weird.
You can also they're pretty cheap at Catholic bookstores too.
You can probably get a copy of it.
Couple bucks.
But yes, read it out.
eBay.
Today we just talked about paragraphs 1 through 15. In the next episode in this series, we're going to be diving into the next 15. So we're going to go talking about 16 through 30 to talk about this next part of Rerum Novarum. Please, this is an incredibly important document in the understanding of life from the perspective of the church. And we are being called to attention, to bring our attention now to some of the lessons that were brought into the public conversation through this, because they are going to be very important as we move forward into this revolution that we are going to live through, this AI revolution. And I can't wait to continue diving into this with you. So grab your copy and tune into the next episode.
If you are reading and underlining things and getting into this, snap a picture, tag us at WalletWin on social media, and let us join you in the journey. And share this episode with a friend who you think is interested in learning more about Rerum Novarum. Maybe they are a Rerum Novarum aficionado themselves, and they just love all things about this, or they love Pope Leo XIII or Pope Leo XIV. Share it with them, and we can reach more people together. So until next time, bye for now.